Good morning, everyone. How are you?
Good morning. Great.
So we get to talk about something that's really exciting and something that all of you, I'm sure, are very concerned about, stuff that's going on in Washington, D.C. And in Sacramento. So let me ask this first of all. How many of you here are involved with or contribute to RPAC or to the PAC in any way? To RAF. In California, we call it RAF. At the national level, we call it RPAC. If you're not, I would highly suggest that you contribute or consider contributing, investing at least $15 annually into your business. It really is truly the best $15 that I think that you could ever spend. If you're not invested in the business, you might as well get out of the business, because if you don't have a seat at the table, the old adage is you're going to be on the menu. And they just keep coming after us with bill after bill after bill after bill that we have to constantly try to stay ahead of and fight and try to maintain private property rights on behalf of all the homeowners and the communities that we represent. That being said, I'll try to keep my comments brief. There's a lot of things that went on. I'm speaking specifically about the most recent NAR meetings that we just returned from, a few of us in Washington, D.C. So a few of the things that, the major highlights of the meeting, and a lot of this is available. You can go in and read all the fine details on realtor.org at any time at your leisure. Just sign in. A lot of it's publicly available. So to fill in the blanks, if there's anything that I mentioned you want more information on, or you want to get you have questions about it, look there, or feel free to call me at any time. Anyway, so one of the things that we did, the board of directors did at the meeting on May 19th, Saturday, May 19th, the board of directors meeting, we took a major step towards increasing professionalism in real estate by giving associations new teeth for enforcing code of ethics violations. Who likes dealing with unethical agents? Raise your hands. Who here has dealt with an unethical agent? Raise your hand. Wow, that's it? I hope I was not one of them. Okay. Anyways, it's positioning realtors for the future by adopting the association's first ever dues increase in 8 years. Under the changes to Section 23J and N of the NAR Code of Ethics and Arbitration Manual, local associations who choose to adopt this policy can publicize the names of members and the nature of their violations after a second violation of the Code of Ethics. I don't know about you, but I sure don't want my name published anywhere. I don't want my picture anywhere, because I don't really look that good. So enough said about that. They can also release a photograph of the member as part of that public disclosure. This stepped-up enforcement option is based on a pilot program that is being run by the California Association of Realtors, which many of you may have already seen on C.A.R.org. In another big change to standard of practice 1.7, a listing broker or agent is required to respond in writing that an offer was submitted to the seller if the cooperating broker who submitted that offer so requests. The listing broker or agent must respond in the affirmative unless the seller has provided written notification waiving the obligations to have the offer presented to them. That change will take effect January 1st. Another change to Section 13D of the Code of Ethics and Arbitration Manual clarifies the rights and role of realtors or principals in an ethics hearing. That changes are designed to bring invaluable benefit to consumers and allow realtors to serve them to the best of our abilities. We also approved what we're referring to as the SMART budget, and please don't ask me what that acronym means because I thought about it earlier and I remembered it, but now I can't, of course. Anyway, it's a major move to keep realtors positioned for success into the future while ensuring that NAR no longer needs to rely on and use our reserves to cover expenses. The board approved a budget that sets National Association dues at $150 per year per member beginning in 2019. That will be a $30 increase over last year. $17 of the increase will be to the Realtor Party for advocacy programming. The remaining $13 will fund programs such as the new Commitment to Excellence Professionalism Initiative, the Popular Forms and Transaction Management Benefit, and upkeep of our association's buildings. NAR underwent a comprehensive review after our new CEO, Bob Goldberg, took over the association last August. The spending plan for 2019 and 2021 is reflective of more than $2 million in annual savings achieved by reducing association staff, cutting our global travel expenses, and making finite across-the-board cuts. They took a very close look at the whole organization as a whole and tried to trim the fat and eliminate programs that were not highly adopted and weren't successful, and are now introducing some new initiatives to try to get more members engaged in the process. A key element of the financial blueprint involves replenishing NAR's reserves, which have fallen 45% since 2015. In recent years, NAR used savings to fund activities such as Popular Forms and Transaction Management Platform Benefit, and for creation of Upstream, an innovative data management platform for brokers, which you may or may not have heard of. Don't quote me on this, and if you have a microphone on, shut it off, because I'm going to say something, and this is my own personal opinion. I'm speaking on behalf of myself, not on behalf of NAR, not on behalf of C.A.R. MLS. If I had to guess, those of you that are familiar with Upstream, I would guess that Upstream will be wound down by the end of this year, just as AMP was wound down at the end of last year. They realized that they were flushing their money down the toilet, and they started trying to leverage the technology from the larger MLSs, ours being one of them, C.A.R. MLS, Bright on the East Coast being another, and MRED in the central U.S. being the other, all of whom are over 60,000 members apiece. The increase also funds needed upgrades, and I'm talking about the dues increase. It also funds needed upgrades. We've been deferring maintenance at our Chicago building. Our Washington building is relatively new, so that requires very little upkeep. These repairs will be made to the association's Chicago offices. There will be some made to the Washington office as well, but not quite as many. Any of you that have been to either one would understand that. In addition, the board voted to establish a reserve fund to cover maintenance costs for the buildings in the future. Lastly, well, actually I got just a couple more things if you'll indulge me. For those of you unfamiliar with the board election, we had a board election. It was the third contested election that I can recall in the last 10 years. Charlie Oppler, Franklin Lakes, New Jersey, was elected first vice president. So the first vice president ascends the following year to become president-elect of the association. So in 2021, he will lead NAR. Vince Malta, our guy, past president of C.A.R. from San Francisco, California, was elected as president-elect. So he will be the president of NAR next year. And John Floor, a good friend of mine from Cheetah, Wisconsin, will be the 2019 and 20-year treasurer. The treasurer position is a 2-year position. It's also elected. And John Smaby from Edina, Minnesota, who was elected earlier as the 2018 president-elect, will ascend to become 2019 president at NAR. Just a couple more items and I'll get out of your way. The on the legal assistance side, the NAR Board of Directors approved an allocation of $340,000 to the California Association of Realtors to help us, or REBS, fight off a copyright fight against the unauthorized use of the association's real estate transaction forms. I'm sure all of you have either seen or been in possession of a form. At the bottom of it, it did not have a broker or a real estate agent's name on it. That's a pretty good indication that they're stealing your forms. And I can say that because you're paying for those. That's part of your dues dollars. If they're a non-Realtor member, if they're MLO and they're only subscribing to MLS services, they charge them over $900 to access the form. So you get a pretty good deal with the forms being included as part of your member dues. And now those have become widely adopted, and NAR is now using those same forms that were originally started in California. On a sad note, our chief lobbyist, Jerry Gianvanello, who probably not a whole lot of the people in this room, other than I just saw Seal Rudar walking in. Seal would know him, any of the past presidents. My dad certainly would know him. Many people here, Lee, would know him. He's been a great lobbyist for NAR, one of the best in the business, and we're certainly going to miss him. Yeah, we wish him well. He's been with NAR for 37 years. That's an awful long time. Some people aren't even alive that long, and he's just done a phenomenal job for NAR. And I wish him the very best of luck in his future endeavors. And last but not least, on my side, Monday I'm heading back to Washington, D.C. I've been invited back there to be on call and potentially sit on FTC DOJ consent decree hearing regarding open access to data and the availability of data to the public. As you probably know, there are factions of people that think that all data that's out on the internet, whether it's behind a firewall or not, should be available to the public. And I'm even talking about private medical records. There are actually people that think people's personal private medical records should be available to anybody that wants to do a name search on a particular individual. So obviously that's something we're fighting. We're fighting to keep proprietary intellectual property data that you would enter into the MLS. Just a couple of examples, the description field, that we consider that to be proprietary intellectual property data because you're creating that. Unless you're copying it and pasting it from somebody else's listing, which I know people to do. If you do that, I don't encourage it certainly, but if you do that, at least change a couple of the words around in it to make it look like it's you that actually said it. And then the agent remarks. Those are another thing that would be considered intellectual property data. Anything that's public facing, of course, if you have an IDX feed and you have oftentimes people have different remarks that they want for the public to see as opposed to what they want the real estate agent to see when they log in, and that's understandable. There are certain things that you certainly don't want the public to see. But other than that, I'm done with my report. Sorry I'm long-winded, had a lot of information to cover. Hopefully some of it was interesting to you. I'm glad to answer any questions if anybody has any. Thank you very much. And now we will move along into our state portion of the agenda, and we will call up our current association president, Helen Chen Marston, who will give us an update on housing affordability at the California Association of Realtors recent meeting. Helen.
It seems not very present topic for this. With California became a non-affordable housing state, and then we are the realtors in the frontier. We know that our areas, our surrounding areas are all non-affordable, and then people move away, and then those affordable places became unaffordable now. We have a panel talking about the discussion of Sacramento. How many of you went to Sacramento a couple years ago? And then how many of you have clients or you refer your clients to buy properties in those areas? So what do you think comparing here Sacramento is more affordable? All right. You know, unfortunately, probably that will be no more the case. You know, with Sacramento is well-planned housing economic development, and with the access to world-class universities. So now Sacramento is being home to a combination of established and startup tech ventures, as well as 17,000 commuters, you know, to travel to the Bay Area daily. So now Sacramento is facing the same problem that we are facing right now. And it might be becoming the latest victim of the housing shortage and affordability. And well, you know, we are actively as C.A.R. to find the solutions to solve the problems, and especially looking actively for legislature solutions. So this time when we were in Sacramento, we went to the Capitol, we meet our legislatures to ask them to support the bills that we support as C.A.R. and think those are beneficial to promote more housing ownership and at least contribute to solve the shortage and affordability problems. So there's follow bills that we support. One is AB 1979 that, well, thinking about majority of the working class, what is their major problem to become homeowner?
Down payment?
You are right, down payment. And so this bill is allow the potential buyers to establish a homeownership saving account to us to purchase a home without paying tax on the interest earned by the fund in the account. So this will potentially benefit 3.56 million people, the potential homeowners. And currently this bill is in the committee and held to submission as May 25th. You know, we always say is the way to achieve American dream for most of the working class to own a home and build equity and to eventually build the wealth for the family. So hopefully that will pass, and then we'll have potential home buyers to benefit on this. So we will watch this closely, and once it passes, and I hope, wish all of you will let news out and to help your future homeowners, home buyers. And another bill is SB 1469, that's accessory dwelling units. And actually I want to do a test that we always talk about ADU for quite a while. And I expect at this moment, all of you should know what is ADU. And I just accidentally gave you the answer. Right. It has been a state law, AB 2299, passed January this year, that allowed ADU to build. But each of the city has their own ordinance over the state law. And then so some of the cities, I believe most of the cities will follow the state law and pass this on to the residents to temporarily solve the problem of the housing shortage and affordability. But I also believe there are some of the cities probably resist this bill and then have more strict requirements on the projects when they approve. They may not issue the permit or put much charge that people cannot afford. So with this bill, SB 1469, that will prohibit the imposition of impact fees, connection fees, capacity charges, or any other fees levied by local entities when construction an ADU, and only permits local governments to deny the construction of a unit based on a preponderance of the evidence if its construction adversely impacts fire and the life safety. Means that you only can deny when you have evidence to believe that that is not safe to build ADU. State that if a local agency fails to act on an application within 60 days, the project is deemed approved. So if you not receive result on your application after 60 days, it will automatically deemed approved. And construction of an ADU would no longer trigger a property tax reassessment. So that is huge. And also grants the Department of Housing and Community Development review and oversight authority over local ADU ordinances and permits the state attorney general to notify local agencies that they are in violation of state law. So we also asked our legislature to support this bill, and currently as May 25th, the bill is in committee and held under submission. So we'll closely watch that too. But what do you think the ultimate solution for housing shortage and affordability is to build, to supply, to having more housing units available. And per U.S. Census Bureau, the 3.4 million additional housing units are needed by 2030. The California Department of Housing and Community Development says the state must build 180,000 each year to keep pace with population growth. Now, the state is building less than half of that. You know, I just checked last night. As April, the state's median home is 584,460. It's more than double the nation's median price. And then, you know, in our state, in San Mateo County, the median price is 1.77 million. You know, we thought our place was bad and didn't even have other places are even worse. And average home rentals are 50% higher than the rest of the country. And then our state's ownership rate is the second lowest among all states in the U.S. You know, this is really saddening facts. But, you know, we are not giving up. You know, we are still trying to find the solutions. And that being said, our C.A.R, we have a latest news, and this was actually approved by board directors this May, the first week, that we approved a pre-development plan for the project in C.A.R headquarters. How many of you went to C.A.R headquarters in Los Angeles downtown? And near the Koreatown area. Okay, C.A.R. is proposing the development of up to 181 residential units on the site of the headquarters of C.A.R., which would include rental and for sale units at affordable workforce housing rates. Affordable units would be available to individuals and families earning 60% to 150% of the area's median income. Additionally, 20% of the units would be allocated to veterans earning 50% or less of the area's median income. So this one, the proposal to move forward with the development will go before the board in October. And then once that plan have more details, we will bring more information to you. And just be aware that we all have a responsibility to help our industry to solve the problem we're facing. Again, the RAF, the Realtor Action Fund, is one of the major ways for us to do it. And we really need to think about it seriously. If you haven't contributed any to the RAF, I sincerely ask you to consider to donate as the level you can afford. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen, for that great information.
Do we have questions?
Sure.
Are the cities being more lenient on allowing things like lot splitting or to build more units on a large lot compared to building mansions on
You could answer that. I'm on planning commission, so I could too. But
Yeah, I cannot talk to other cities, but for what I know around cities and the city Temple City, I think they at least not oppose as long as the lot subdivision apply to the zoning code and then applies to the building standard. I think they are not opposing it.
I'll talk later.
Okay, I know something going on
Yes.
and not happening yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
thank you, Helen. Thank you for the question, Sil. And now we will bring up our esteemed president-elect, Giuseppe Veneziano, who will talk to us about the Fair Housing Act, which is 50 years old.
Thank you, Tom. He actually took away my pop quiz.
I could reel that back in.
So yeah, as Tom mentioned, our Fair Housing Act is now 50 years old as of April. But that wasn't the first time that we had our law in place for fair housing. It actually started way back in the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which was 102 years prior to the Fair Housing Act that happened in 1968. Let me ask you one pop quiz that Tom didn't mention. Who was opposed to the Fair Housing Act in 1967 when it first came onto the legislative? You must be Republican. Actually, did you know that NAR was actually opposed to the Fair Housing Act at first? And admittedly, they actually admitted that they were wrong, that they were opposing it, but in 1968, they supported it after many legislators came to them and pointed out why Fair Housing Act was a good thing for the country. So today, 50 years later, they're still partially, depending on which areas you're at, I'm pretty sure there's still some discrimination among people buying, people leasing, or people renting homes. Now, show of hands, how many people have experienced being discriminated against when buying a home? Not many, but there has been. And so even though 50 years later, we came with the Fair Housing Act, there is still progression that is coming in, that NAR is still moving forward, because what their goal is to have many people from different walks of life to stop being discriminated against. Because every day there's a new group of people that is being discriminated. Back in the 60s, it was with race. Then currently there's, how to be politically correct, gender discrimination, right? Their sexual, gender, whatever it might be, their walk of life. So NAR is still moving forward and progressing, and they actually passed out these little pins called Fair Housing Makes Us Stronger. And me being my little creative self, I actually made some cufflinks out of them. See my cufflinks? I do that as a hobby. But
You should see the shoes.
oh, no. Just socks. So history was written, but the future is still ours to write. So there's a lot of progress that has been made in the last 50 years, but there's still more work to be done through NAR. So be informed, take action, and expand protection to other groups that are not covered by Act. And we all know, has everyone here taken orientation?
Yes.
When they first started? So do you know the 7 different areas that are protected by this act? Right? No? Yeah. Well, you know, it's race, color, religion, sex, handicap, familial status, and also national origin. So those are the 7 that are protected by this act, but there's still many others that are not. And they keep coming up with different acts to keep amending the Fair Housing Act so everyone can have the equal opportunity to live the American dream and have home ownership. And it's our duty as realtors, let's distinguish, not real estate agents, but as realtors, because there's a distinction between that it's our duty to go ahead and practice the fair housing, because it's part of our ethics. It's actually Code of Ethics, Article 10 in the NAR. So if you haven't read up on the Code of Ethics, breeze through it because they are pretty long, some of them. So anyways, the Fair Housing Act does advance the American dream for everyone, and it's very good for us to get informed on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Giuseppe. And we now have to look forward to our wonderful GAD, Lee Lieberg, who will give us a brief rundown on federal taxes and the political landscape up in Sacramento. Lee?
Thank you, Tom. I'm going to try and make it brief because, 1, it's boring, and 2, we need to hear from Nick afterwards. Federal taxes. So everybody knows that they passed a major tax reform this past year.
Yes.
And NAR worked diligently to influence that, and now they're kind of taking credit for some of the changes that they made. One of them is 199A, which I think is going to make a lot of those in real estate happy when they do their taxes next year, and it has to do with pass-through income from corporations as well as the business income deduction. So hopefully we feel a little bit of relief from that. On the negative side, those of us in California are going to be hit with a limit for the state and local income tax. They call that SALT, state and local tax. And that limits you to $10,000 of deduction for your state income tax and also your mortgage interest tax. So what we're fighting for now is that, as it is now, if you're single, you get $10,000, and if you're married, you get $10,000. We don't think that's fair. We think that you should get $10,000 if you're single and $20,000 if you're married. So that's one of the things that we're proposing right now. Along with that, another one that I think could be important is to index both of those, the SALT and the mortgage interest, the MID. So what happens is if they don't index it, those become less important as you have more inflation. So anyways, the mortgage interest is capped at $750,000. Well, when they put that mortgage interest deduction limit in, it was $1 million, and it was in the 1980s. Well, we all know how much $1 million home bought you in the 80s as opposed to what 750 buys you now. So they've capped that at 750. We want it at least indexed so that each year it would go up with inflation. Okay, let's see what else we have here. At C.A.R, AB 1979 would create a home ownership account, and that would work much like an IRA, and you'd get to deduct that from your income, and then you'd get to save for a home. And as was mentioned earlier, it's so difficult to save for a down payment. ADUs were covered earlier. Let's see. We all should have received a call to action this week for AB 2364, and that would affect the Ellis Act. The Ellis Act has to do with your just cause eviction. If you, let's say you purchase a property and you're going to move into the property, I believe it's 5 years now, and it would be extended another 5 years, so 10 years that tenant would have a right to stay in the house. 10 years is too short for them, 5 years is too long for us. So we need to fight this and really kind of protect that. AB 2925, this would require all landlords to file a reason for their just cause eviction. So in a rent control area, you have to go in and you have to have a viable reason for a just cause eviction. Usually it has to do with you moving back into the property or an immediate relative is moving into the property. That would basically make that a requirement for everybody in the state, even those areas that are not affected by rent control. C.A.R. 2618. Specialty licensing had to do with licensing, and we should have gotten a call to action. You should have had it last week. Hopefully you responded. And it would require licensing for property management. Well, we already take courses in property management where we already have a license that allows us to practice real estate in a number of areas. And if you look at other licensed professionals like accountants and attorneys, an attorney doesn't need one license to do family law and another license to do trial law and another license to do real estate law. They get a license and it covers the whole area of practicing law, and we feel that we should be treated the same way, that we would get a license or a broker's license or a salesperson's license that would allow us to practice real estate across the board. Okay, now at the risk of really getting in trouble, I'm gonna talk about something that I really think it's not more important, but it's more timely and more relevant. And yesterday, Nick and I were downtown and we went to the Board of Supervisors task force. And so this task force is called the Affordable Housing, Rent Stabilization. When they first named it, we said, why don't you just call it rent control? Because that's what it's all about. And if you'd have been at the task force yesterday, you would have realized that it is simply about tax about rent control. So if this, well, let me back up to, the makeup of this commission is so skewed to the tenant, it turns your stomach. There are probably about 7 out of the 10 are activists for tenants. They're attorneys that represent tenants. I think there's 2 or 3 of those. And anyways, we've complained because we aren't getting a fair representation. They're now going to give us some time, and we're going to have 20 minutes. So all the tenants in the LA County, or all the landlords, are going to have 20 minutes to state their case. It's ridiculous. It has to be approved by the Board of Supervisors after it passes through this commission. The Board of Supervisors is probably going to be our best chance to fight this. Certainly not at the commission level. But as it passes through the commission, it's going to be the strictest rent control that I've ever seen. They're talking about items like vacancy control, so that if your tenant moves out, you will only be able to raise your rent 10%. We all know that's protected under Costa-Hawkins. Costa-Hawkins is going to be on the ballot in November. They're trying to overturn it. They probably spent a third of the meeting yesterday talking about what to do in the event that they're successful in overturning Costa-Hawkins. So, and then limit for new construction. We all know that one of the adverse consequences of rent control is nobody wants to build new construction, which doesn't help our housing shortage. So now it's 1978, I think, Mr. Bird, you would know, that anything built after that is not affected by rent control. They want to change that so that it's anything that's 10 years old, so that that number is always moving and that number is shortened up. We have Malcolm Bennett. Many of you know Malcolm. He's a broker. He was on that board, and he was the lone voice of reason yesterday. And we have also a professor from USC who's in the real estate school there. He's the dean of the real estate school, and he was outstanding when he came, and I think he kind of threw up his arms. He's still providing some input, but he hasn't been attending the meetings lately. When he suggested that they do an analysis and find out what the rents are in the unincorporated areas of LA versus LA City, which already has rent control, everybody says, oh, we don't need that information. So anyways, we have an uphill battle. If I was to guess, again, off the record, but I would say that we're going to have rent control in the unincorporated areas of Los Angeles. They need 3 votes. They certainly have 2. The third vote's kind of a swing vote, but I would say the odds are that we'll get some type of rent control, and heaven help us if it looks anything like what this commission has put together. So, all right, with that, Nick, or something.
Thank you. Thanks, Lee. That was great information. And as Lee kind of alluded to earlier about the calls to action, I can't emphasize to you how important those are. These legislators do take those into consideration. And I can give you one specific example. 2 years ago, an assembly member in Burbank, Mike Gatto, he introduced a bill on the assembly floor that was detrimental to homeowners. And there was a call to action across the entire state. Usually they're targeted to specific areas, generally to the legislator that introduces the bill, and then if they don't get the reaction that they desire, then they'll expand the red alert. Well, they didn't get the reaction that they wanted, so they did a statewide red alert, and not only including giving his phone number, they also had access to his Twitter account and to his Instagram account and his Facebook account. So they bombarded all of his social media and his phones, and he effectively went on to social media. In fact, I saw him on the news later where he said, I would appreciate it if people would stop calling me and blowing up my phone and blowing up my social media accounts. I've got the message. And he rescinded the bill. He pulled the bill. So it is effective, whether you think your voice is effective or not, it is effective. I understand some people are reluctant to call. They feel uncomfortable talking for whatever reason. You don't have to give them any reason. You just call them. If you're a registered voter, you just call the number, put in either your PIN number or your NERDS number. When the staffer comes on the line, all you tell them is that you're a constituent member and you would respectfully ask that your assembly member or state senator vote either in the affirmative or in the negative on the bill, whatever the bill is that is suggested. And with that, I will bring up our last speaker, who is none other than Nick Baldry, our Vice President, and he will talk to you and myself and educate us on tax portability.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First things first, turn to your neighbor and tell them, I'm still awake. I know it's been a marathon session. I know there's been a ton of information. The great news is I am the last speaker, so we're almost done. Just to what Lee was saying earlier, especially with the LA County Supervisors meeting, I got up early yesterday. I did attend, and Lee got to watch my face fall over the course of 2 hours. At the makeup and the way that group was functioning. When he says we have an uphill battle, he's not kidding at all. This is the most skewed group you could possibly imagine. Malcolm Bennett is really a lone voice out there. So when it comes time to put pressure on the local supervisors, we're really going to have to mobilize, because that is by far and away our best chance. Speaking reason to that working group is, it's going to bounce off of them. It really is. But on to the topic that I was put on the slate to talk about. Who remembers the portability initiative that Helen made a focus of a lot of her president's messages, and I know a lot of our board of directors members were waving those sign-up sheets. Now, we remember why we need that. We need that to help seniors be able to move. A lot of them are, as an unintended consequence of Prop 13, trapped in their own homes in a sense, because they can move around the state as they might necessarily wish and bring their tax bases with them. Now, C.A.R. and we obviously think that's a fantastic idea. There are, however, some groups that don't. Particularly firemen's unions, teachers' unions, a lot of public service groups who are afraid that this move will somehow reduce cities' incomes and have an impact on their budgets. It's actually reached such a stage where the firemen's union, I believe, have threatened to picket open houses during the run-up to the November election. They're that opposed to our portability initiative, because they believe that there would be several $100 million worth of deficit to the state. C.A.R., I should point out, completely disagrees with those figures, but those figures are what the legislative analyst office have come out with at the moment. In response to this, C.A.R. has put out, at Sacramento, put out a motion that started in my committee, actually, Taxation and Government Finance, to try and find an alternative route to get our portability initiative through, something that might meet a good deal less resistance. And that's going through the legislature. So the legislature in Sacramento can introduce constitutional amendments, which is the same thing as what our portability initiative is now. And we have a friendly legislator who has proposed that she would put through our portability initiative in full, as well as a couple of other points. One is actually an extension of the property tax portability. If you recall, our proposal affected those 55 and over, as well as victims of estate disasters as well, but primarily 55 and over. She actually proposed adding homeowners 45 to 54 getting a one-time property tax-based transfer if they downsize. And the third point of the motion was an elimination from the property tax reassessment for parent-child and grandchild transfers of primary residences that are not continued as primary residences and the $1 million in other real property. So that's basically your income property, your apartment units, your commercial buildings. Currently those are exempt when they're passed from parent to child or grandparent to grandchild from a property tax reassessment. This is essentially trying to pay for our tax portability initiative on the front end and defeat the resistance that we would get from the firemen's unions, teachers' unions, and groups like that. I should point out that this proposal still preserves the property tax reassessment for parents who pass to children or grandparents who pass to grandchildren or primary residence that is kept as a primary resident. So if that child or grandchild remains in that home, that property tax reassessment under this proposal remains. Now the timeline with this is, because it's a constitutional amendment, it can theoretically get through Sacramento quicker than other legislation. And we have until the end of June, I believe it's June 27th if I remember rightly, to decide whether our ballot initiative is going to be on in November or whether we pull it. So the idea is that as this legislative option goes through its process in Sacramento, we will see where it is at the end of June. If it has stalled for some reason, or if it has been changed significantly, so it's somehow significantly less advantageous than our ballot initiative, then we will be able to say, well, look, the legislative option didn't work, we still have a ballot initiative and we will push forward with that in November. If we get what we are asking for through Sacramento before the end of June, then the legislative option would go on the ballot, but it would go on in spring 2020. And the advantage with that is, one, turnout is lower and typically more favorable to the kind of voting demographics that we want to pass this. And two, the campaign is likely to be significantly less expensive. And the estimates for fighting in November reach the tens of millions, potentially pushing toward $100 million in campaign funds that we would need to dedicate to win the November ballot initiative. The estimates for spring 2020 are significantly lower than that. Not to say it would be completely unopposed, but we definitely need to get our message out to the voters, but it should be at significantly less cost. So we're in a position where we have two routes to get to our aim. We're hoping for an easier route with the aid of the politicians in Sacramento. But again, as Lee's pointed out, they come up with some fun and interesting ideas from time to time. So we're not totally beholden to that. And if we do need to fight a campaign in November, we'll be fighting a campaign in November. Believe you me, we will be asking for your support and your backing, whether it's November of this year or spring of 2020. So are there any questions? I've put you all to sleep again, I'm sorry. We have one of them.
And actually it goes for Lee. There was a time, and I'm not sure now, LACBOR was very involved on those type of things. In fact, I remember Martin Bennett from the LACBOR. Is there LACBOR still in existence? Are they still going to the board of supervisors? And maybe, I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
LACBOR is still involved, and although they've somewhat taken a back seat to the LA Housing Coalition for Responsible Housing Solutions, which has probably 20 different real estate associations that are contributing to it, as well as BOMA, Apartment Owners Association in Greater Los Angeles. So they've put together a coalition that goes really beyond LACBOR.
And I guess my question comes for this issue that you're talking about, rent control. Where is LACBOR and all of these groups, and as far as representing? That's my.
Yeah, well, we're actively fighting it as well.
Okay.
And we're going to put our focus on getting word out. Because we think that the brokerage community doesn't really know what's going on and how close this is to becoming a reality. And we think that the LA Coalition has kind of fallen short in that area.
But yeah, in short, LACBOR is still very much there, and I know Western Gabriel is a member at LACBOR, and we have representation there as well. I've been to one meeting, I'm intending to go to more too, so. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much, and I'll hand back to our MC.